Your journey has been an interesting one up to here. You've questioned so much more than those around you. You've even questioned yourself as to how you could have grown into these thoughts. Am I crazy? When did I begin to think differently? Why do people in general appear so limited in their thought process? Rest assured, you are not alone. The world is slowly waking up to what you already know inside, yet can't quite verbalize. Welcome to the Spiritual Dope Podcast, the show that answers the questions you never even knew to ask, but needed the answers to. Questions about you, this world, the people in it. Most importantly, how do I proceed now moving forward? We don't claim to have all the answers, but we sure do love living in the question. Time for another hit of Spiritual Dope with your host, Brandon Henley. Let's get right into today's episode.
4, 3, 2, 1. Hey there, Spiritual Dope. Today I have with me Prabhat Gautam. And you know what? I'm going to deviate a little bit. I'll definitely let you know that Prabhat comes from, to me from positive television.org. It's positive television is something that Prabhat has created himself, and he connects with a ton of different people and organizes lots of awesome events. But today I want to take a little bit of a deviation from just kind of doing the biographical statements. I just wanted to say, Prabhat came to me by way of, just kind of like a random introduction. You had introduced Kiko Ellsworth to the podcast, and I just wanted to reach out and say thank you for that. And then it turned into, kind of, getting on the podcast. And I just thought that was really cool because you never know whose life you're touching, right, when you do these podcasts and who you're reaching out to. And even before we got started today, you were sharing that, well, you're still listening to a podcast or two, and it's always great to hear that what's being sent out is being heard. So thank you for being a listener, but also for being a connector, and also for the work that you do in the space that you are in, which we'll certainly talk about, and for being on here today.
Well, thank you so much, Brandon, and thanks for creating this amazing platform. And when I'd heard episodes, I wanted Kiko to be on there because Kiko last year did this amazing conference, and he was looking for opportunities to talk about his spiritual journey. And I was like, Brandon's the guy, because the reality is what you're doing with the whole spiritual dope movement and what you're doing with your podcast, it's really getting spirituality, I think, to a next level where it's real for people. And I think during our time today, we'll talk about how you're making it real for people. And it's not just, as we've heard many times on your podcast, this out there thing that people aren't practicing every day. You're making it a practical thing. So thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad that that's coming through, right? Because that's absolutely the intent, is how do we make this practical and less nebulous and more of something that is in your life every day, all the time, right? There's no separation. So since you have listened, then you should know, right? The next piece is that the universe speaks through us, right, Prabhat? And there's somebody out there today that is going to be tuning into the podcast, and there's a message that is being delivered to and through you that listener's going to need to hear. What is that message today?
I really deeply believe that I want people to find what they're driven to do, and it may not need to be your occupation, but live more of that. If you're a painter and you love painting, I'm not saying you need to quit your job and become a professional painter, but make time every week in your life to do that. If you love going to the beach because it brings you joy, go once a week, once a month, like take your vacations there. So we know deep down what we're drawn to, like there's a magnet. We know what we feel deep within we need to be around. And I think for the truth is, for a lot of us, it's good people, it's inspirational programming. So go find that stuff. So that's what I hope people will do is do more of the stuff that really nourishes you and fulfills you. Because when you do that, amazing, wonderful things open up, and mostly you open up.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the idea that simply do more of what you love, right? And it doesn't have to be this thing where you throw everything away and just do this thing, right? Like you always hear people talking about burn the bridges and let it all go, right? Um, but just to find time and make that time to go do it. Um, and the idea, I love the idea that it's going to nourish and fulfill you, right? Can you, I mean, talk a little bit more about what you mean by nourishment and fulfillment, right? What's that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, what it really means is my three favorite analogies are always sports, dating, and food, right? Those three things. And I think like when you think about when when you're in those worlds, if you meet somebody, you like them, you want to spend more time, right? There's like this magnetism if you like somebody. In sports, you do all this time to practice every day because you're preparing for the game. And if you go into a game and you've never practiced, your level of performance is just not going to be at the same level as your competitors and your teammates. And then obviously in the food world, we've all done this. We're all guilty of it. I'm still guilty of it sometimes. You have this packed day where you have so much you have to do. You look up, it's 2 o'clock. You haven't eaten anything. You haven't drank juice. You haven't like, you've basically gone through a 5, 6, 8 hour day with no nutrients, often no water. And that's going to affect your ability, like it's going to affect your brain, it's going to affect your effectiveness. And the reality is it's going to affect your mood. You're not going to be as loving, as nurturing, as thoughtful a person. So for me, everything comes back to we know what nurtures us, we know what fills us. So when you know in you what you need to be nurtured, and I know for me on the food level, I love quick snacks. Like I love snack bars. I love to have juice in the morning, and that's how I like to run my day. So if I'm not doing that, I'm not taking care of my basic nutritional needs, it's going to impact what I'm going to be able to do for other people. I think you know this, Brandon, with your podcast, you might do multiple podcasts in a day, but if you're not making any time for you and your loved ones, it's going to affect your podcast. Like you're going to feel it. Your energy level is going to be a little lower. You're going to be a little tired. You're not going to have as much focus. And you're doing this all the time. I think at a high level, I think you're doing amazing work. But the truth is, can we all do things at a higher level, and how much are we holding ourselves back when we're not nourishing ourselves?
Yeah, that's powerful, right? Can I mean just the idea of can we be doing something at a higher level by nourishing ourselves, right? By adding the element of making sure that we're taking care of ourselves, and that's inclusive of taking care of our families, and as look, as a family man, right? I will definitely feel thrown off balance if uh, I'm not having that family time, right? And it'll definitely show up in everything that I'm doing, just like you're saying. So one of the cool things, I mean, that I know you through, right, is the positive television piece, right, which you shared with me. Well, let's talk a little bit about that and how you got that spun up and organized and what took you there.
Yeah, so for me, I grew up on the MTV era, right, in the 90s. And I remember when I just loved it. I love music videos. I just love sort of it was this pop culture phenomenon. And I think, getting out of college, I was like, well, what do I want my life to be? And I went and I did an internship with Amnesty International. And I thought my life would be putting these reports together about what's happening internationally and fixing, atrocities and how do we change the world. And then right before I finished college, I interned with the vice president of the university at University of Oklahoma. And then I started writing out what would my dream world look like and how would I want to be part of it. And I felt like media has this incredible power to motivate, inspire, and get people to take action. So I thought, well, okay, media can do that when they tell stories. And this is, 1999. I thought, well, what if you're actually intentional with your media? What if it's not like, oh, there's 29 minutes of local news that's depressing and terrible and you're scared, and the last 30 seconds are, somebody saved a cat that went up a tree. What if we actually just did all positive stories? Well, we're being realistic that there's a lot of terrible things happening in the world, but it's always solution oriented. And that's really sort of the impetus of what positive television turned into. So I moved out to LA in 2000 to create this television network. And again, I was young, I didn't know what I was doing, which I honestly believe is the best place to be at. When you don't know what you're doing, you just take step, step, step. And you might take a wrong step, but it's a learning step. So again, right, I love to use words like failure and wrong, because I think so often people view those as negative. And I feel like if we own, hey, I failed, hey, I've made the wrong choices, then it's like, okay, well, then I know there's a right choice to make. Now I know there's a chance for success. So for me, I leaped in this world, moved to Los Angeles to try to create this television network. And the next thing that happened is events. I'd met all these people that I thought would help me build this network, and I ended up producing events. And now, 21 years later, I've produced 800 events in Los Angeles with huge celebrities, huge super wealthy people, and now when I look back in 1999 and 2000, I did a cable TV channel, but I saw a world where there's no commercials, where you're just telling stories. And the reality is, there was no YouTube, there's no Facebook, there's no Google in 1999. Like, none of that existed in the way it exists now. So sometimes when you're early, it's really difficult because you think the world doesn't believe in what you believe in. And later you realize, like when I listen to podcasts now and you watch YouTube videos and you see Netflix, Amazon, there's so much content that's inspirational. It was like 1% of the content in 1999. Now, if you want to be surrounded by positivity all day, you can live in that positive bubble as much as you want, which I think realistically we need. We need, after you've had a family member that's passed or something sad happened, you need to just be lifted up and you need to be in a place of all positivity. And then when you come back to the regular world, where there's some negative, some positive, you can still have 80-20, 90-10. You can curate your positivity. And one of the podcasts that you did, Brandon, that I loved was with Mr. Youngblood. And you talked about, which I loved, you said if somebody finds a spiritual community and it doesn't work for them, it's not an indictment on that community or on you, it just isn't a fit. So go seek out other communities, because once you find your community, you know it, you feel it. And sometimes the search isn't the first door, it's 4 doors, it's 8 doors, but every door taught you your resilience and how bad do you want to find your tribe.
Yeah, 100%. No, and thanks for that. Right. The idea is, I think once you start to feel that spiritual pull, there's kind of no stopping you. But there's the opportunity to find a community that you don't really, identify with or feel like you fit in with, and you can keep moving, again, like you're saying, beyond to the next door, There's so many places that you can go right now, that it's just amazing. And to your point, right? We didn't have YouTube back in the day. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have all these communities. We didn't have all these things open to us that we've got available right now. But I love the idea of what you're saying too, in that kind of if you're a visionary, right? If you're ahead of your time, you may feel like people aren't believing in you, or you start to maybe doubt like your own vision and kind of what you're going through. And it's not that the world isn't ready for you. It's getting ready, right? It's like getting dressed for the prom, right? It's just going to take a little bit longer than you expected.
And I think too, sometimes it's, I remember in college, I was flipping channels late at night and I saw this story about missing kids. And I said, why are we not finding these kids? I never knew any kid that's missing. I just saw this story and it just impacted me. So I started writing letters to Oprah and Rosie O'Donnell and CNN. I said, we need to find these kids. Let's show photos of them. Let's incorporate it into your programming. And I remember getting all these letters back where they're like, oh yeah, we tried to address it. We're doing this, we're doing that. And I remember I did a mock-up of what I thought that looked like. And it was this television network where all the commercials would be little ads at the bottom. There'd be no real commercial, just be it's basically what's a banner ad on the internet now. And I remember kind of writing everything up and saying, I think the future is going to be a ton of content. When John F. Kennedy was killed, you see the story where the reporter's telling, Walter Cronkite tells the story. I want to watch the whole news coverage before that last minute where he says it. So where do I find that archivable footage? And I thought eventually there'd be a video outlet somewhere where you'd find archivable news footage. I had no idea what YouTube would be. It would be silly videos and cat videos or whatever else. But it's also what you were saying, it's highly educational. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all these things, they can suck up your day and 19 hours are wasted, or it can be inspirational. You're growing, you're learning, you find your community of people. I have so many wonderful friends who live in that social media space. They work in that space. They're in the, they're influencers in that space. They have people that they know every aspect of their life, they're friends with, that they've never met face to face. And I think, isn't that a beautiful thing? Like, you're creating pen pals all over the world that you're connected with. And for me, I use social media where I like to put stuff out. I don't spend a lot of time interacting on social media. But again, I think that's a product of my age. I think that's sort of, I come from a world of, if there's somebody that's doing something cool, like what you're doing, Brian, or somebody else, I'm like, hey, you guys should know about this person. I cold call people. I've done that for 30 years. And I think, when I meet these Gen X, Gen Z kids, they're like, what's cold calling? I'm like, you find somebody that's doing something that's really amazing. You send them an email or a phone call, or you just pick up a phone and you call them and say, hey, I love what you're doing. This is why I love it. And sometimes there might not even be a reason why you are going to work together. You're just telling them, hey, I respect what you're about. And sometimes those things lead to amazing friendships. You could work with those people. At the very least, they got encouragement. And I think, we're in a world of, we all love being encouraged. We love positivity, but I think part of that equation is we need to put that out. We need to be encouragers. So when you see somebody say something positive, so that's really,
right.
why I'm so excited about this world of, I think it's a whole new media phenomenon where it's not 4 channels. It's not, 4 channels that dictate to you what you learn.
Mm-hmm.
You get to pick what you want to learn every day of your life. And if you don't want to learn I remember in 2003, I had a good friend who's Episcopalian and she would do Lent. So I said, I want to do Lent. My background's cultural anthropology. So I gave up all TV for a month. Well, it happened to coincide with the Gulf War, the 2003 Gulf War. And I remember thinking, I'm so lucky I missed that, because how negative was that, seeing bombs thrown on people and death and just sort of be in a constant state of fear, where, just happened to coincide with the time it's the only year I ever did Lent. But that Lent will always be memorable to me, because I grew. 1 year I did Ramadan. I'm not trying to be Catholic or Episcopalian or Muslim, but Ramadan, I said, I want to see what this journey is for people that do that. And I had so much understanding for what people go through that really don't eat for the day because they don't have access to food. I get to do it as a chance for me to grow and, try to see what a billion people in the world are doing. But realistically, there are people who don't eat a meal the whole day. There's children that don't eat. So if I can grow as a person and can walk in their shoes for a few minutes, it makes me a better person.
Right. No, I love that. I love the idea of, just trying to walk in somebody else's shoes for a period of time, going through, I've never done Lent. I've never done Ramadan. Right. And one of the things that I certainly encourage, my family to do, at least my children, is to research other cultures, right? Go research other cultures outside of America, and what do they do? What do they celebrate? What is that celebration? What are those kids eating this week, right? What does that look like for them? And this is something that I took from one of my history teachers way back in the day. Is like, find something, like some type of food that culture makes, and let's eat that. Let's make that meal, right? Like, what goes into that, and kind of where does it come from, and the background of it. And so definitely love that. One of the things that I don't think that we really hit upon, you do events. What type of events do you do, with these 800 events? What kind of events are they?
Yeah, so it's a charity space. So it's a ton of fundraisers. So in 2008, I did a fundraiser for a group called Kind Kids in Need of Defense. So undocumented children that are picked up by ICE. And it's one of Angelina Jolie's charities. So that was amazing. And she wasn't there. So we didn't get to get married. So I'm still sad by that. I think she was with Brad Pitt at the time anyway. But I got to put that together. I've done a lot for Stars with foster kids. That's something I'm passionate about. And then a bunch of the animal charities, Gentle Barn, Farm Sanctuary, Humane Society. Like there's just so it's really my sort of focus is what's the group that doesn't have a voice, and then how do we give them a voice? So it's animals, it's people, it's people abroad, right? Like I think even people here, it's women in domestic violence, they don't feel like they have a voice. It's kids, so that's so much of it. So I'd say the majority is definitely fundraisers, and then along with that, what I love is doing documentary launches, doing book launch events, restaurant launch events, like the whole thing of getting people there to celebrate. I love that. So that's really, when I look back at 21 years and 800 events, I mean, there was 1 month, September 2007, I did 30 days of events. So because I'd never done that, I said, I want to challenge myself. I want to do an event every single day that I produce. And we'll never do that again, probably. There's a lot of time, but I definitely, it was amazing because I teamed up with all these other people and said, hey, I'm doing this month of events, come up with a really fun idea. And there's a woman, she made, little vegan baked goods, and she wanted people to rollerblade at a park. And that was the event. She made these baked goods, she gave them away for free. People showed up, they rollerbladed with her. And so it's like, that's fun, and there's some fundraisers obviously during that month. But a lot of it's just, I think my passion is, how do you help people figure out their community? How do you grow community, and how do you use community to do maximum good in the world? And I think what we all know is we all have, whether people have the financial resources to help, or they can just share a video, share a story. There's just, we have the ability to help raise awareness. And, I was talking about people, my friend Sheena Metal has a whole movement called Raising the Vibration, who I'm definitely going to introduce you to, Brandon. She has a whole radio thing with LA Talk Radio, but that's her whole thing. It's like she does, public events on how do you raise vibration in the world. So to me, that all comes back to it's just bringing more positivity, and I'm an obsessed connector. So how do we connect people and then get them to do more good? Because once I meet people like you, Brandon, I'm like, hey, if this person has a great podcast, who are the people I know to be on it? And if I meet somebody that's a chef and they're doing a cookbook, well, who do I know that are photographers to help them with their books? So I'd say so much of my work is people reaching out to me because they have a project and they don't know how to move it along, and then I help them make it happen.
That's awesome. And I love that, it's kind of like you've got this, gift of being able to see kind of what's good in everyone, and to be able to connect the goodness as it is, right? And to help them to scale that out is what it sounds like, right? Somebody doesn't know, they've got a great idea, or they, and they just want to give to the community, and then you're able to help them kind of put that together in some way, shape, or form. And really what you're doing is raising vibration.
Well, thank you. And I mean, some of the things I'm excited, people know me for, like helping with the documentary Forks Over Knives really early. And then with the documentary Game Changers, I helped introduce those producers to, some funders to help pay for it. And it's like, a lot of people that are pieces to puzzles. I just love when people are just really honest with me, and they just say, hey, this is where I'm at. This is our budget. We would love to hire you, bring you in to help us do this event. But, we also need to just raise funds for the project. So strategically, what do you think we need to do? And I just sit down with them and I'm honest with them. And I say, these are the steps. And, this is what, from my experience of 21 years of events, where I think you're going to have the best opportunity. So much of what I talk to people about is go to friends and family first. When you have an idea, I know a lot of times our family's not encouraging, and that's why a lot of people get into these spaces where they want to help. But I think give them a chance to say no, because if you don't go to them, it's a no. If you go to them and they say yes, and I mean, I've met with people that they say, oh, well, my best friend's father is a multimillionaire, but I don't really want to go to them to help, but I have this idea, but I have no funding. And I always say to them, go to your friend's father, because maybe he won't give you $1 million, maybe he'll give you 5,000, 10,000, but if he gives you 10 or 20,000 for your project, well, then you start it. And once you start it, it's just the philosophy of take a step. Every step you take,
Right.
is what I've seen over and over and over again is when people are in the idea phase, we're so used to people talking about ideas and it doesn't turn into anything. But when you take action, people don't want to hear, oh, I want to go from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. They're like, I bought a ticket to go from LA to D.C. I don't know what I'm going to do when I get there. I don't know how I'm going to, there's a whole environmental movement that happened a couple of years ago where people went out there. It's like, but once you bought the ticket, people are more likely to be on board. And I'm not saying use your savings to buy that ticket, but if you don't take that first action step, people don't believe you're really going to do it. But once you take this step, that leap of faith, people feel like, wow, this person's committed. What can I do to help them? So I think give people an opportunity to help you, but it starts with what's your action step. And I tell people all the time, do Kickstarter, do Indiegogo, do GoFundMe. Again, you may only raise 2,000, but that's 2,000 more than you started. But what's going to happen is you're now putting it out to everybody you know. This is what I care about. This is my passion. And now that person that's your friend for 5 years who isn't going to be able to donate, but their friend's friend has XYZ that you need to help with your project. Well, why do we need money? We need money to move things along, right? It's a currency, right? It's a current. It's it's water. So if you have the raft, you go out to the water and you know how to swim. It's important that you know how to swim. Take swimming lessons, then get out there and people be like, oh, that person's cool. They're out there swimming. What are they swimming for? Like I remember years ago, I had a good friend. She wanted to do a walk from LA to Washington, D.C. to raise awareness about a bunch of issues. And I said, okay, that's good. Are you serious? She said, I want to do it. So it was about children's issues, animal issues. Next thing you knew, my friend Peter Samuelson, I told him about it. He said, he's trying to raise awareness about homeless issues. He said, well, can she push this portable homeless cart that his organization, EDAR, Everyone Deserves a Roof, is part of? And I told him, she said, yeah, I'll push it. Next thing in the process is the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles, Jeffrey Lurie.
Yeah.
Peter got Jeffrey Lurie on board, and the Philadelphia Eagles doctors were going to be her personal doctors on her walk.
Wow. And
it all became real. And then she's like, wow, am I really going to do this? And obviously her family got scared. And in the end, she ended up deciding to go the grad school route versus the walk across the country for a few months. But for her, she needed to know people believed in her. And she's this amazing activist. And sometimes what you need is not what you believe to happen. You need to know people believe in you. I think for her, she was in tears. She's like, Peter got Whoopi Goldberg on board. He said, well, we're doing this event in Philadelphia. Why don't you, instead of kicking off in LA, kick off in Philadelphia, and then let's have Whoopi Goldberg announce your walk, and you start in Philadelphia. And she was like, I said, you have Whoopi Goldberg, you have the Philadelphia Eagles owner and their doctors on board. You don't need to raise $5,000 or $10,000. You raised awareness, and through that awareness, you're going to be able to raise a bunch of money to do this. And you're going to raise so much awareness for these causes. So I just tell people, let everybody in your circle know what you're doing. And if they feel like it's authentic and genuine, this brand, like doors open. Doors always open.
It's so true, right? Just like you're saying, as soon as you take that first action, like you're talking about, take that leap of faith. It's kind of like I call it like the signal to the universe. Be like, all right, I'm doing this thing. I'm gonna need you, or like the fall back thing. I'm gonna need you to catch me, right? Like I'm putting this foot down. I'm gonna head in the direction that I told everybody I was gonna head in. I'm gonna need like universal backing. Could I go ahead and get that? And it shows up, and it shows up in such amazing and powerful ways. I mean, I still like kind of well up about, even connecting with you and connecting with all the people that I've gotten to connect with on this podcast and all the other podcasts. It's just so amazing what will open up if you're willing to, like you said earlier, open yourself up to it. Right. So absolutely.
All of these things were at the beginning, right? right? Like we're newly friends, right? Friends forever now. And now it's like, who are the amazing people that I'm going to be inspired by through your podcast that I'll send you an email? Hey, Brandon, that person's cool. I'd love to connect with them.
Yeah.
And then vice versa, right? Like you met Kiko through me. Now Kiko is going to hopefully tap you into his network of all people at his conference in the next year when he does a live conference. Last year he did a virtual one, but when he does a live one, well, I'm sure he's going to want you to be part of it. So it's like, you just see these are the beginning of relationships that are for your life. And again, we're all in different cities, but the paradigm has shifted in such a profound way that we don't need to be next door neighbors in the same block. Like we can literally be anywhere in the world and communicate and connect people to one another, and all these amazing things happen. I mean, I really am just such a strong believer in, when he did the analogy of somebody falling backwards, it's good to know at least one person will catch you, but all you need is one. If one will catch you, then that means there's 2, there's 10, there's 100, and there's 100 people that'll catch you. Well, you don't need to fall backwards. Now you're all moving forward together. You're all running, you're walking, you're running, you're, walk, jog, run. And then now you're the marathon. And now you're raising all this awareness, consciousness about all these, right? Like, and I tell people all the time, I don't care what your passion is. I really don't. Like, I have my passions. I don't care what your passion is. Just figure it out, find it. And if I can help you find it quicker, I want to be part of it. I had a good friend years ago. She said, if you met somebody that wanted to be a hairdresser, you would do everything to help her start her hairdressing salon. I said, yes, I would. And I don't have any desire to go to a hairdresser. But I think if you see people's passion, you want to help nurture that. You want to be part of that. And to me, it all goes back to, right, in the world of business, right? They always tell you, oh, if you do this introduction, you do this, well, you get a cut of the deal. I don't want 10% of people's joy. I want 1,000% of their joy. Like, to know you help somebody find their passion and you are part of it.
Right.
You don't need them to tell you that. You don't need plaques. Just to see their light, see them excited, to know you are part of that journey, and everybody they're ever going to talk to, you are part of that, and vice versa. They're part of your joy. What's that worth? That's gazillions of it. Like that's such a higher level value than any amount of money.
No, 100%. You can't buy that, right? And it's a challenge to instill that in someone who doesn't have it too. But even though it's already there, right? You can see it for them, and like you want to help them to see that in themselves, right? Like you're talking about that light, getting them to explore it, and maybe needing that encouragement. Like you said, somebody says they want to be a hairdresser, you're like, yeah, let's go, right? Like all you need is just that little. I always think about like the tiny seeds in the cracks of cement and sidewalks, right? There's like nothing around them, but just the tiniest amount of nurturing, right? The nutrients gets them to blossom and grow in that place, which, to me, it speaks to us as well, right? As humans, it's just a little bit of encouragement to go do that thing you said you wanted to do. And I bring this up because it's how my first podcast came about, right? I had a coach, and I told her I wanted to do a podcast, and I was expecting her to say, well, that's a dumb idea. You really shouldn't deviate from doing that. And instead she's like, all right, well, what can I do to help? And I was like, oh, what?
Yeah.
Right. And it's just, and that's all you need is just a little bit of that type of encouragement to go and find and do the things that you love, but to have the support of some other people with you, that makes it tenfold and beyond. So the other piece that we were talking about before we figured out our technical challenges today was the idea that I think you seem to be in a pretty good spiritual place. Seem like you're feeling pretty happy. You've got like your light that you shine to help other lights shine. But you talked a little bit about like a lot of these people that you help with these events that are sad, right? And let's talk a little bit about that since you brought it up earlier.
Yeah, so years ago, I met Andy Dick, who's pretty known for his drug and alcohol addictions, right? So we became friends, and then we had a gallery in Hollywood together, and I remember, just seeing that world of fame and how so many people, like, they want to seek that out, right? They want to, and like, and you know, then Andy, his brother, dies. Like, it's 3 a.m. one night, and I said, he and his girlfriend, what do you want your legacy to be? Because as far as we know, right, we're all going to be gone one day. What's your legacy? And he said, I want to prevent people from the hardships I had. And I said, Andy, what does that look like? Is that a book? Is that a tour? Do you want to speak to college kids so they'll never get into addiction? He said, I'd love to do that. I said, so, you know, I'll send him an encouraging text still and say, Andy, we got to do that book, because he wants to help get people out of the pitfalls he got into. And I think so often in the world of celebrity, you know, I interviewed Jim Greenbaum. He's donated 44 million to charity. Amazing person, right? And he's always in a place of giving, and high level celebrities, you know. And what you realize is people think they want to have these people's lives, and they miss that. Jim talks about, when you're a philanthropist, he said, every day of my life, people are pitching projects that they need funding for. And I have to pick, who do I fund and who do I not fund? And whoever I don't fund, they may not be able to get the help they need. And he said, I only have limited resources. No matter how much money I have, I still can't fund everything. He said the majority of his time is on the phone with other donors, trying to get them to help fund projects. So, you know, he figured out the areas he wants to focus on. He tries to encourage more people as they're growing their wealth to give the money away. And I think we look at it from an outside, like, oh, when you're famous or when you're rich, your life's going to be easy and you're catered to. What I think people miss is there's a loneliness a lot of people with wealth and fame have. And there's also this world where when people come to them, they always need something. And so, you know, I remember when Jim moved in his house in Los Angeles, the first week he moved in, I brought over Amy's soups for him. Because I said, Jim, you're a worse cook than me. I want you to have easy soups so you can just warm them up, you know? And I've been vegan since 1999. He's vegan, plant-based, you know, for a while. So I said, hey, these are easy soups. You throw them in the, you know, you heat them up on the stovetop, it's good. And I said, he doesn't need me to bring him soup. He's a super wealthy person. But I said, we're legitimately friends. I would do that for any friend, whether they have $1 or $1 million. And I think we just got to be in a place of not having this idol worship. And I think, you know, what I love about what you're doing with your podcast, Brandon, is it's making spirituality real for people. Because I think too often they think the pastor is amazing at their church. They think the spiritual teacher of this yoga practice is amazing. Well, what happens when that person has a scandal, which they do? So when the person you look up to is flawed, do you throw out your whole spiritual practice because they're a flawed individual? Or do you say, okay, they were trying to teach something good, but they themselves didn't even get the fullness of what the lesson is? So I think, you know, I said to a good friend recently, these are systems. Religion is a system, right? These spiritual practices are systems, and people can be bound within the system. And there's a group of people who see outside of a system, and the system can still help heal you, can help you grow. I say all the time, if somebody has a drug addiction, alcohol addiction, they've been through a lot of trauma, I want them to find organized religion if that's going to help them do it. I think there's deeper beyond that, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think there is. So I think whatever you need to break whatever is holding you back, do that. But ultimately, I want people to find I think there's a direct pathway for people. When you find good people, find them. When you find encouragement, find them. However people want to describe these things, energy, God, whatever, you know, atheist, it's like, it's love, it's goodness. I think it's inconsequential, the labels we put on stuff, because me coming from a cultural anthropology background, there's different words for everything. There's cultures that have no word for snow. So to snow, because it doesn't snow in those communities. So snow exists. The fact that they don't have a word for it doesn't mean that they're lesser or they're devoid of snow. You know, I think we get so caught up in the semantics, the word games, and people are so busy trying to convert to their one segment of their view, where really I think the real work is encourage people to find what is working for them, be loving, be nurturing. And if they're on a path you don't like that they're on, they'll find their way. And I think there's an element of people, there's a missionary element where they want to convert everybody to their one practice. Well, what happens when you grow out of your practice? You brought all these people to a practice that doesn't even work for you anymore. So instead of trying to bring them to your practice, tell them what works for you, be honest about it, tell them any sort of issues you ever had in your journey, and be honest about it. And then if they find the same practice, great. If they don't, you being honest is so genuine. You know, I think for me being vegan for 21 years, I tell people all the time, there's some of those vegan cheeses and meats I didn't like at the beginning. I don't sell it as, oh, everything's great here. I'm like, these are things I like, these are things I didn't like, this is why I liked it, and this is where, you know, my vegan world has improved. And I think a lot of people resonate with that more because it's a real commentary on my journey. And I think the same thing for you, Brandon, what I hear you talk about is, you know, you've gone through the podcast, you revamped, you changed some stuff, you learned. You didn't wake up one day and you're the next Joe Rogan. You woke up one day and started it, modified it, lived life, modified it, lived life, modified it. Where you're at today may be different than where you're at 10 years from now, but where you're at today is where you feel drawn to be at. So to me, that's your journey. You're supposed to be doing what you're doing.
Right.
And you see it, you feel it.
Yeah, it's impossible not to.
Yeah.
Right. Once you do begin to feel that draw, that pull, and into where you're going. I always say too, if I'm still talking the same talk and saying the same things in 10 years, then something's probably wrong. Then I'm not learning, maybe, right? Like I'm like, I always, you know, I throw that out there. And then I'm going back to kind of earlier in the conversation, just in the whole idea of if you don't know how to do it, start doing it now. Right? Because you know, it's almost better that you don't know anything, right? And you just start to do it, and you start to do what feels right for you. I love what you're saying about the whole idea of, you know, and this, you know, I was certainly, you know, again, to your initially, you know, kind of falling into the spirituality space. It's like, oh, you gotta do this way, do this. This is the way, right? And it's not, right? That was my understanding of my path at that time. You have your very, very, very own path, and it's up to me to encourage you to follow your path. Share some of the practices, like you're saying, that I have found that have worked for me, and they're called practices for a reason, right? Because I'm practicing them, and I'm practicing, you know, implementing them in my life, and maybe one day I won't use these same things anymore. And
I remember when people talking to me about yoga, I was like, it's too still, I can't do it. And then when they do meditation, I'm like, I'm gonna fall asleep. Then I had a good friend who, she said to me, meditation is whatever you want it to be. Like when you're on a train, if you're closing your eyes, you're listening to music and it gets you in a calm state, that's your meditation. And it broke for me the rigidness of it all. And I realized, like, we want people to find calm and peace within, and especially in a world of just hustle bustle, you're running around all day. So if you close your eyes 2-3 times a day and it's calming you, and you know, when you're in the shower, you close your eyes, or you just enjoy the water, or when you're in the morning, right, having a bowl of cereal, or you're having whatever you're having, and you're like watching, you know, YouTube videos of your favorite singer. If it brings you joy and it's uplifting you, I mean, I always say my life philosophy is the Sheryl Crow song. If it makes you happy, it can't be that bad. Because I think people should seek out what makes them happy. And then when they realize it's empty, then you need to pivot and be really honest with yourself. I tell people all the time, if they want to make as much money as they can make, go out and go on that path. And then when you find that it's empty for you, you realize, okay, you need to make money to live. It's good to have money so you can, you know, take a trip. It's good to have some savings. You know, that'll make your life easier. But this pursuit to be the richest, most famous, the most everything person is going to end up where you're not going to be that. One day, you're not going to be the richest, prettiest, smartest, everything is famous, this person. And then once you lose it, you're like, well, who am I? And then you realize that's a question you should have asked all along. Who am I? And find that, and then let all the other things sort of take care of themselves. And I mean, one thing I definitely, you know, when I listened to your podcast, that stuck out to me, that I was like, I got to talk to Brandon about this, because either it's going to resonate with me or resonate with you, or we can have a really good debate. I hope for the latter, but I think it's going to probably resonate. Is my critique of sort of this new world of spirituality, whatever the last 20, 25 years, is it's too much of a multi-level marketing plan. You got to sign up 10 friends, and they're going to sign up 10 friends. We're all going to become really wealthy, and we'll all get a piece of it. Where it's really, I think the way it should be is just to live your life, live your light, be who you are. And when that happens, you're not going to sign up 10 friends. You're going to sign up, one person's going to see what you're doing. They're going to be inspired by it. They're going to go find 1,000 people. They're going to find whoever. And the reality is there is no, hey, you're going to get a percentage. This isn't, we're not selling a product. We're trying to uplift generations to come. You're trying to create light in the world and create positivity for generations well beyond where our lives. So if that happens, there's no scorecard. Like, you know, if you're inspirational, you know, when people reach out to you, right? And they tell you, oh, your podcast inspired me. Oh, for me, I got where people are like, your event was so amazing. I got to meet some of the most amazing people. What people have said to me, they're like, because again, at my events, I during events, if I think, oh, wow, this person's here, that person's there, they need to know each other. So I'll do in-person introductions. And I'll say, this is why I think you guys should meet. I'll do email introductions with people. Person A, person B, this is why I think you guys should meet each other. And when you know they end up creating amazing, wonderful projects together, you get that inspiration in you. So I think sort of my critique of sort of this new spiritual world or last 30 years of spirituality or what's presented is I do think there's nothing wrong with selling products, making money, doing coaching, all that stuff's good. Like, I think we need people to live in their spirituality every day of their life. But I think when it ends up being, well, you got to be happy every second of the day. No, you shouldn't be. If somebody close to you has passed away and you feel no sadness, I question your real journey. You should feel sad. When somebody close to you says, they just went through a breakup or they were in a domestic violence relationship, your reaction should be, how do I help you? Oh, I feel terrible for you. Have you gone to counseling? Do you need a place to stay? What are actionable steps to help you? And you should feel their sadness. And again, you know, in that moment, maybe you're not crying, but you're figuring out action steps. But I think real humans are not happy 24 hours a day. Real humans, you know, question, am I doing what's right? I think checking in with yourself is so important, and saying to yourself, is this the right thing for me to do? And something that you did I remember when I was in college in University of Oklahoma, I did a cable television show for 4 years, and it was so much of my identity. And one day I was like, this feels like work to me. I'm not enjoying it anymore. And then you think, what changed? It's because I knew I was going to leave college, and I needed to leave to start my life somewhere else. And I didn't know it's Los Angeles in 1998, 99. I just knew I was going to leave. And I think you start preparing yourself. And again, this many years later, I've been involved with 5 documentaries. So that television world has been part of my life, but it needed to change. I needed to leave. You know, it's always like, you got to close some doors to open new ones. And one of my philosophies that I'm obsessed with is owning the word quitting. You have to quit relationships, you have to quit jobs, you have to quit things that are not the most fulfilling thing for you, with the belief that something more fulfilling is going to happen. And I think so often people leave relationships when they meet the next person. They quit a job because they found the next job. It's like, one of the best things I ever did is I started working part-time at a job I was in for 4 years because I knew I was ready to leave. And that allowed me to transition into all the event stuff that I've gotten into. So I think preparing yourself without fully knowing what the next thing is and taking that step and like freeing up the time, I think that's so important.
No, I think that quitting something, right? Being okay to let go of that thing, because you know it's no longer fulfilling, and knowing that and hoping, or at least drop the thing that's no longer fulfilling, right? Just drop it. Like, just go do something else. There's going to be something else that will take that space for you, right? Energetically or whatever. And you know, to your point, I would definitely want to jump in on the the spiritual MLMs, right?
Yeah.
And the idea. Listen, when I first, I don't know, when I first started podcasting, I always say that I started it for the wrong reason. It was like that, right? I started it for the wrong reasons, but as I grew and evolved, or changed, whatever happened throughout that podcast, I always say that I did the right things for the wrong reasons, but through that time, like my heart, I was liking myself to the Grinch. My heart grew 2 sizes too big through the process. And
Yeah.
I just really understood more about what it was that I was trying to give. I understood more about the idea that, I want to just give this freely as I can for right now, because if I do it and I attach what it is that I'm doing to, kind of for monetary gain, or at least monetary gain in the sense that it has to be done. There was desperation behind that feeling, right? And I couldn't just do it naturally and just be like,
Yeah.
this is what's really coming through me now. And there is no and people are like, kind of what's your end game? I was like, I don't know. This is just what I'm doing right now, and I'm connecting with amazing people, and I'm getting to hear amazing stories from other people, and it's my hope that there's somebody else out there that the next Prabhat is listening today, right? That says, hey, you know what? I want to get involved in the communities the way that you have. I want to find my way forward the way that you have, and that person's inspired, right, to follow similar footsteps, right, for themselves, but like be led by you to that place, and just by virtue of you and I having a conversation, and it's possible, and that's why I love to do what I do.
That's so beautiful. And I think what you said is the reality of like it's all a journey for everybody. And at the time you knew you needed to get in this work. And I think there is a thing, okay, well, there's production costs. There's going to take time, right? Early podcast, I mean, you're buying super expensive microphone, like all that stuff. It's like, well, I'm putting money out. Well, how do I make that money back? And I think and it really is that whole world where people tell you like, well, if you do this, well, you got to like really, it needs to be more ad based. It needs to be this. Like everybody chimes in advice, and 99% of the people that tell you their advice, they're not making money off what they're giving advice for. Like I always feel like it's a world full of single and recently divorced people giving dating advice. Like what do we do? Like we need, like I want to talk to the person who's been happily married for 30 years,
Right.
got the struggles they've had off and on for the 30 years, but they're like, every day I wake up and know there's no other person I want to be with than this person. And during that day, there may be a few minutes where we're like, there's no, this person I don't want to see in the next 5 minutes. But then they
Right.
go back to there's no other person I want to be with. Like the reality of what their journey is. I think that's just a beautiful, real thing. And I just think so much of the spiritual MLM world is, oh my gosh, do this. Like my friend's cousin's friend made $10 million off of it. And it's like, can I meet your friend's cousin's friend? Because so often these are like, they're stories that are just to get more people signed up. And it's sort of the carrot. And it's like, if you have really good water, let me try the water, because we all want good water.
High
So
quality H2O.
Yeah, it's H2O. You have this great, like, whatever it is, like detergent that's chemical free, let me try it. Like I had friends for years like, well, you should get in the world of where you sign people up. I'm like, no, if I like it, I'm going to buy it. I'm going to give it to my friends. And if they want to buy it, good. If they don't, that's fine. Like, just give me good stuff that you think is going to like uplift my life. And then you guys can sign them all up under you. But I've had friends for years. They're like, oh, but you have such a great network. You're the perfect person to be in whatever it is, like real estate or sales, or like, there's so much money you could move here and there. And I was like, I don't have any interest. I want to move money into making a difference. That's what I want to do. And powerful. To me, I've been able to do that in the charity space. So it's like, that's what I want my life to be. And if other people meet these amazing people at events that I do, and they can figure out how to monetize it, well, good. And when you monetize it, hopefully you remember where you met them, and then give some of that money to the charity that was the event that you met them at. And if you don't do it, well, hopefully you have a really good life and you're happy and you raise amazing kids. Like I look at it as, I just don't fixate on what are your treasures before you're buried. I look at it as your treasures are the people that you interact with every day. And in the end, the goal is, I mean, I always tell people, right, your goal is at your funeral to have all these lives that got changed. I remember a lady I met, Jeanette Dubois, when I was in college, and she told me this amazing story. Jeanette was probably in her 60s. She was at the cable station that I did my college cable show at. And she said when her mother passed away, so many people came up to her at the funeral and said, you know, your mom helped us this time. You know, your mom let us stay at her house. You know, your mom, we struggled financially. She did this. She's like, I didn't know my mom did 10% of that stuff. My mom is so much more of an incredible person than I realized. And Jeanette was this amazing, incredible person. But it's like, you see that what she was like. And it's like, that's what you should want your funeral to be, where everybody's like, wow, Brandon's amazing. He did all this stuff. And you know what? He was doing stuff when there was no parade. You know, Owen didn't do a show around him. But before he was big, he was helping people. Nice. And then he got big, and he was big time, and he wouldn't return your calls. But that's okay. No.
What a jerk. What a jerk, that guy.
You'll always be there for people. But I think it's like, it's who you are. They always say, like, it's who you are when nobody's looking.
Right.
That's your character.
Right. Rob, real quick, what, how did you know that this was the path for you? Like, where did it like dawn on you that like this was your heart song, that this was what you needed to do for the rest of your life, or up until now at least?
So I would say you always, like, I think when you're a kid and you just want to help kids in school, or there's just something in you that just has a helper spirit, like you feel it. But I think really what all happened was from 1993 to 2001. That 8 years was my journey. So my father died of a heart attack when I was 16, and that's a big experience for a child. And then, a few years later, I was in Oklahoma, and the Oklahoma City bombing happened. That's a hugely traumatic event. And then you start thinking through, okay, now I want to help, I want to give back. How do I help make the world better? And then in the year 2001, I was working for a startup in 99, 2000, making really good amount of money as a 24-year-old. I moved out to Los Angeles to create Positive Television. And then that next year, I became a bone marrow donor. And the girl that I was a donor for, Anka, I tell people all the time, I met President Obama, I met all these celebrities, I met billionaires, but being a donor, nothing compares to that. It's the greatest experience of my life. And so I was her bone marrow donor, October 3rd, 2001. And then a year and a month later, she passes away. I'm devastated because I'm like, this child, I'm supposed to give her away at her wedding. I'm supposed to see her have kids. Like, I'd written out a story of how this stranger was going to be like my adopted daughter. As she was a stranger. I didn't know her. Like, I signed up to the National Marrow Donor Registry, nmdp.org, where people could sign up. And it's the greatest gift I ever got to be her donor. And then, that really took me on this trajectory where I was like, I have to be, because I think, when you're 23, 24 and you're making a lot of money, it's easy to get caught up in distraction. And I think what happened was, I left out, I was in New York on 9/11. I was supposed to fly back from New York to LA on 9/11. So having all that sort of tragedy in my life from 93 to 2002 just kept me on this path where I didn't get detoured. I didn't get into drugs. I didn't get into alcohol. Like, I wasn't dating 1,000 people. It's a one committed relationship. It's like, I think, you meet somebody, you break up, you meet somebody new. But I was on this, like, I think for me, all the tragedy just kept me super hyper focused, and it kept me optimistic, because for sure you feel sadness after tragedy, but it also, what I learned is after every major tragedy, people step up. After 9/11, after Oklahoma City bombing, after my father's passing, after Anka's passing, you see families, community all show up for people. And then my question is still to this day, why don't we do that all the time? Why does it take tragedy, right? I'm sure, you've been at funerals, you've had lost loved ones. When that happens, we feel like, oh, well, why don't I connect with these people? Well, this person was going through a tough time. Why didn't I know about it? And it's like, well, how can we be more present? One of the best documentaries I recommend all your listeners to watch, it's called The Bridge. And it's about how the Golden Gate Bridge is the leading place for suicide in the US. And this was probably 10 years ago. 24 people a year would jump off the bridge. And they had cameras set up. And anytime somebody's about to jump off, they would send people in to try to stop them. and one guy was jumping and he ends up surviving, so you get to hear his story. But in that, I was like, and one of the people tells the story of like, you know, when he jumped, he did end up jumping and he ended up luckily surviving. That tourist didn't even realize that he was depressed and suicidal. And it really got me to a place where I was like, I want to be present with people. If you see somebody crying, go over and say, you know, are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you? Can I, you know, get you a coffee? If you see somebody that looks shaken, like check on people. Because I think our natural instinct is to be caretakers, to check on people. And then people will tell you, oh, well, don't check on those people. It could endanger you. It could be a massive setup to get you killed somehow. I just don't think that's 1/1 billionth of 1% of the time those things happen. Just be present for people, because when you're present, that person needed to know somebody cared. Like, I remember I was in a train in Los Angeles. There's a woman who, you know, some guy was bothering her. You heard upstairs. She comes downstairs. I'm like, do you need anything? Are you okay? You know, do you need me to call the police? And she said, oh no, somebody else did that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be here near you. If you need me, I'm here. And I thought, okay, those are words. That sounds good. But what if he really comes back downstairs and tries to assault her? What does I'm here for you really mean? Does that mean I'm going to go fleeing, or I'm really going to like be the gap, the boundary between her and this person? And I made sure, like, I watched her and I made sure she got on the train. She was going a different direction than I was going. And the guy luckily never came downstairs, but I think if he did, I think once I told her I'm here for you, I have an obligation to be there. And if he kills her, then he needs to kill me too. Because if I said I'm going to be here, I have to be here. And so for me, I feel like, you know, there's that whole thing of like, who is your brother? Who is your neighbor? Who's your sister? Who's your daughter? Are these people you're blood tied to? Are they people that you regionally know? Or is it every person in humanity? So I think we all determine that for ourselves. And then once you make the determination, I just think you view people differently, and you view people, if you view everybody as connected to you, then you realize both the person hurting that's trying to hurt this woman is connected to you, and both this woman that is potentially in danger is connected to you. So your job is to be of loving as you can be in those moments. So.
Agreed. I think that the idea, I mean, was you know, love thy neighbor as yourself, or something like that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
And once you kind of understand what that means, and you start to apply that in other places, it takes on a whole different level of kind of compassion, like you're talking about, or like you're saying,
Yeah.
we're all connected, and how do you show up or more in that way, right? How do you make sure you're showing up in that way? All right, quick one for you, Prabhat. So, you know, I've come to believe that this is kind of like a spiritual speed dating show, right? Where
Yeah.
now, like, you know, somebody's tuning in, they're like, you know, I'm looking for my next spiritual date. And so I've got a question for you that is from our, you know, spiritual speed dating question pool.
Okay.
And it's going to be, what is the greatest quality humans possess?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think it's the greatest quality humans possess is love for those that they have no direct connection or benefit from. I think when given an opportunity and people can be of help and they believe their help will legitimately help, they will step up. And I think we see it every day. We see it all the time. Like they have to know that they can help. Because I think when it's like, oh, well, there's homelessness is a problem. How do I help? But if somebody's like, your friend needs a place to crash for a few weeks to get on their feet, you're like, well, I'm going to make space for you. Like, I think so that's what I'd say.
I think that's awesome, right? And I mean, that's what you're doing, right? With your kind of like with your life, and I think that's really cool because there's not that many people willing to do that all of the time, and that's something that I think that that's one of the things that I admire about you and your story, right? You're always giving, and you're doing it in a way where you don't expect a return. You're doing it for the love of what it is that you do. And I think that that's very, you know, it's just really cool to be able to see that. Prabhat, where should I send people to come find out more about you?
So they can go to positivetelevision.org and they can see all the content that we put out. And then I tell people all the time, I'm not a big social media person, so call me. I'm going to give them my number because I'm still old school. I love human to human. So if you're working on an amazing project, or you just are like, hey, I want to be of service, I want to do this to help people. One of my favorite things to do, I tell people all the time, it's like talking to somebody who has a world-changing idea, a community-changing idea, or a personal life-changing idea. I'd love to talk to them, then connect them to whoever I can connect them to. So I'll give you my number. It's 310-872-0669. That's 310-872-0669. Feel free to text me or call me. And I'm always trying to be honest with people. It may not be a project that I can help you with, or maybe I don't know the pieces, but if I don't know the pieces, I'm going to try to help you figure out what are the pieces to get you a step further. Because I want every single person to be closer to what their passion is. So if I can get you a step further, great. If nothing else, I get to meet another great person in the world, so I'm happy to take that call.
Awesome, Prabhat. Thanks so much for being on here today.
Thank you, Brandon. I want to say, I love what Spiritual Dope is about. Everybody, please encourage your friends to follow, like, share, and then also tell people to listen to the episodes that inspire you guys. Because if you love an episode, that episode, if it resonates with you, then it's going to resonate with your friends. And don't just send them to the, hey, just go check it out. Send them to the specific episode that really inspired you, because we need to get people on this journey to find their own personal healing so they can help heal the world.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Spiritual Dope Podcast, stay connected with us directly through spiritualdope.co. You can also join the discussion on Facebook, Spiritual Dope, and Instagram at spiritual_dope. If you would like to speak with us, send us an email through brandon@spiritualdope.co. And as always, thank you for cultivating your mindset and creating a better reality. This concludes the most thought-provoking part of your day. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay fully up to date. Until next time, be kind to yourself and trust your intuition.